Francisco 3, San Diego 2. Mets at Philadelphia. That one was rained out. This is SRN Sports.
We hold these truths to be self-evident.
In the land of the free and the home of the brave, Americans today are a little less free. I'm Shannon Gessling, and we are Southeastern Legal Foundation. Since 1976, Southeastern Legal Foundation has taken on the tough fights, protecting property rights, free speech, economic liberty, and holding government accountable when it goes too far, just like our friend Ed Dean does every day. Learn more at southeasternlegal.org.
WEJF Palm Bay, WKFA St. Catherine.
With SRN News, I'm Rich Thomason in Washington. Looks like it was a natural gas explosion that wrecked a county jail in Pensacola, Florida last night, killing 2 inmates and injuring as many as 150 people. The Lynchburg, Virginia city manager says 50,000 gallons of oil are missing from 3 rail tankers. It derailed, exploded in flames, wound up in the James River yesterday. Authorities don't know how much of the crude burned and how much actually spilled into the river. Crews battling that smoky wildfire in the foothills east of Los Angeles, bracing for a return of gusty winds that initially pushed the fire toward more than 1,600 homes. The latest report on consumer spending has put a smile on economist Hugh Johnson's face.
It's just very, very good news. Consumer spending, now it doesn't sound like a big number, but it's up 0.9% in March.
But April brought more pink slips.
We saw layoffs in the month of April up 17% from what they were a month ago. Over 40,000 job cuts were announced.
John Challenger with the outplacement firm Challenger Gray and Christmas. Also at srnnews.com, it's something that goes back to the earliest days of the Republic.
65 times proclamations have been issued calling for a National Day of Prayer.
Shirley Dobson chairs the National Day of Prayer Task Force.
34 out of 44 presidents have signed proclamations for National Days of Prayer. They included George Washington and Abraham Lincoln.
And this year, Barack Obama. Dobson speaking today at an observance on Capitol Hill on this National Day of Prayer. This is SRN News. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell says if he loses Kentucky's Republican primary, he'll back his primary challenger.
Senator McConnell is favored to win Kentucky's GOP primary, but he has been in a tough race against businessman Matt Bevin. The Lexington Herald Leader reports McConnell agreed to a request from the Kentucky GOP to sign a pledge committing to support the eventual Republican nominee. A spokeswoman for Senator McConnell says in her words, from day one, Senator McConnell has committed to supporting the winner of the primary election. She went on to say, the stakes of this election are too high to give President Obama another vote in the U.S. Senate. While Senator McConnell made the pledge, Bevin's campaign has yet to respond. Lindy Kenyon, SRN News.
A Western Pennsylvania church has been collecting money to help pay for the defense of a 16-year-old boy charged in a mass stabbing at a nearby high school. More details at srnnews.com.
With an SRN News Business Brief, I'm Andrew Stewart. AAA giving some welcome news to motorists.
In its monthly forecast, the Auto Club says the average price of $3.69 a gallon for gas likely is at or very near its peak for this spring. AAA expects prices to decline heading towards Memorial Day as gasoline production outpaces demand.
We are sorry for your pain. Sorry for the death. Israel's prime minister and he insisted that the war would not end, or the threat of the would not
All right, the Ed Dean Radio Show. Thank you so much for tuning in as we are broadcasting live all throughout the state here in Florida. The email address, eddeanradio@gmail.com, eddeanradio@gmail.com. You want to watch us live on the air, just go to eddeanradio.com. Twitter is at eddeanradio and facebook.com/eddeanradio. Coming up the show today, Chris Salcedo from Glenn Beck's The Blaze Radio Network, Kevin Derby from the Sunshine State News. These polls all around the state still lead Rick Scott spending millions of dollars, and yet he's still being defeated in the polls by Charlie Crist. We'll get into that in just a little bit. A little bit about Benghazi today. David Williams from the Taxpayers Protection Alliance also going to join us here. And here on our Newsmaker lines, Cameron Seward, who's a program manager at the Heritage Foundation. You know, Cameron, first off, it's good to have you on. And in the articles, by the way, you want to go take a look at Heritage, which is a great group. Just go to heritage.org. I have always been fascinated about this topic, the Export-Import Bank. People hear of the IMF, the World Bank. Can you clarify what the Export-Import Bank does? And I'm just going to get deep here, Cameron. What in the world do they do?
Right. So, and I appreciate you allowing me to come on and talk about this today. So the Export-Import Bank, or EXIM for short, it was a New Deal program created during the Roosevelt administration. The bank provides loans and loan guarantees, as well as capital and credit insurance to facilitate U.S. exports. So basically, a foreign entity will come to the Export-Import Bank and say, I want to get this pretty sweet deal on buying, U.S. goods. Can you help me out? And then they offer, again, credit, capital, credit, insurance, etc. So that's how it works. But the real issue is when you really get down to how this thing functions. That's what becomes really troubling for conservatives.
What makes them different than like the IMF and the World Bank here?
Well, because basically it's a government entity, a U.S. government entity, to promote U.S. products. Although, again, this financing that they provide to these foreign entities is backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government, which means taxpayers are ultimately on the hook for any losses that the bank cannot incur. So, as it currently stands, the bank has officially reported $134 billion in bank deals, a number which the bank's own inspector general has said is probably very much underestimated because of sloppy record keeping, etc. So again, these risks are all taken on by the taxpayer ultimately. That's who the burden would fall on if the bank is unable to cover. And to kind of compound that a little bit, the proponents of the bank, they say, oh, these EXIM fills in the gap in private finance, or private entities won't finance. Only 2% of exports are financed by the EXIM Bank. So the first point is that, well, why, if the private market does not want to sustain this risk, why are we putting it on the American taxpayer? If the market, if the private sector deems it unsuitable risk, why are we giving it to the taxpayer? And then the following question is, well, shoot, it's 2%. Who's the 2% that gets to benefit from this? Whose goods benefit from this? And when you dig down farther, you see that this is very much a big piece in the broader crony capitalism agenda of the Obama administration.
You know something, Cameron, if I didn't know, and I covered a lot of this on the radio show, it sounds like an unglorified version of the Fed.
No, it's not, I mean, not exactly, but it's the same kind of,
it's not the same thing, but it sounds
along those lines.
Yeah, that's right. That's why I said it sounds like an unglorified version.
Right, that's right. An unglorified version of the Fed. And, this is, again, so conservatives are fired up about this, and rightfully they should be. Everyone should be fired up about this. It's one of those things that not a lot of folks know about, but again, $134 billion, probably more, taxpayers on the hook for that. This all goes into this crony capitalism, and of course we know that crony capitalism permeates our entire economy, the kind of union between big business, big government, and special interests that twist public policy to benefit the Washington insiders unfairly at the expense of everyone else.
Cameron Seward is the program manager at the Heritage Foundation. You can read all their articles at heritage.org. Tell me, do the loans get paid back?
So you know what? That is interesting, and it's more of kind of guarantees should something go awry, and it's kind of like credit insurance that would facilitate exports, because again, the claim is that these are too risky. For the private sector to take on, the private sector is unwilling to do this, so we look to you, the federal government, to issue insurance on these too risky business deals.
How much funding does the Export-Import Bank get a year from Congress?
No, there is. It's my understanding is that there's no direct funding, although it is the reason that we are discussing this, right? The reason that it's kind of come up and you'll see it increase in the debate, increase in force on the Hill, is because Congress authorizes the Export-Import Bank. It reauthorizes its charter every couple of years. The last time was 2012. It is up for reauthorization at the end of September.
All right, right. Maybe I need to re-ask the question. How much have we bailed out on guaranteed loans for the Export-Import Bank?
Well, that's what it's potentially right now. And I need to look into that number. How much to date we have the taxpayer has paid into it, as opposed to how much is outstanding, right? We have the $134 billion outstanding right now that the taxpayer is on the hook for. I'm not sure how much to date since 1934, when this was created, how much the taxpayer has paid for any sort of losses that the bank has incurred.
Cameron, this thing's been around 80 years. And the bottom line is, I mean, and I've seen this stuff before. I've read y'all's reports on this. I've seen the Cato Institute talk about this before. Why now are we bringing this? I mean, not you guys, but why are now conservatives bringing up this issue? I mean, why is it that we always, I mean, even among the Republican Congress, is this thing still getting reauthorized then?
Well, because, a couple reasons. First of all, it's easier to go along than get along, right? It's easier to just keep rubber stamping things than to stand up and say, well, hold on one second. Their own internal investigators say this thing is pretty shoddy from within. It's run and fraught with mismanagement and dysfunction. Not to mention,
like we're really shocked.
Right, this is a complete market distortion. We talk about a level playing field. Well, this is certainly not a level playing field. Boeing is benefiting from this. Lockheed Martin is benefiting from this, above and beyond, more so than the middle-sized companies to small companies that we know really drive innovation and job growth in this country. So, it's a great, again, it's part of this bigger crony capitalism or anti-crony capitalism agenda that conservatives have taken up and that are pushing, and this just happens to be a big part of that, and also it's opportune time, since this is the chance for Congress to say, look, we're going to let this charter expire on September 30th. We're not going to issue any more we're not going to allow the bank to take on any more risk, and certainly it'll have the risk that's already incurred, but eventually it will fade into oblivion.
It sounds like something that the government did back in 2008 called TARP, where these companies were too big to fail, and of course, with the continuing the redevelopments with the housing program through Fannie and Freddie, that if you fail, we'll back you up.
Right.
So I mean, there really isn't a risk take. I mean, there really ain't taking a risk that says whether we should do it or not. We'll just back you up. And you're right, it is all about crony capitalism. I mean, Boeing can afford to be on their own. Other companies can afford to be on their own, and I just don't get. I mean, why in the world? I mean, if you wanted to play winners against losers, why not go for smaller companies?
Right.
I mean, I'm just saying, technically, if you're going to back them up, instead of big companies like Boeing that actually make a profit.
That's exactly right. And again, you look at why this has kept going. Well, there's a lot of skin in the game. There's a lot of big companies that benefit from this, that can spend a lot of time and money on lobbying efforts to keep the trains running on time as far as the Ex-Im Bank. And you better believe that they're going to fight tooth and nail to keep this thing going. And so, kind of as your listeners, as we again kind of head into this debate, folks are going to propose, members up on the Hill are going to propose, well, let's just kind of trim around the edges here and improve the management from within. And I would say no. The core problem is the market distortions in the political favoritism that the bank plays, and that all of that will persist. Because that is a very fundamental basis of the Ex-Im Bank, and all that will persist unless the authorization is allowed to expire completely.
Why so much chatter going on right now this year, primarily about it, than compared to any other year now?
That's a good question. I think, and I applaud it, because I think, again, this larger anti-cronyism agenda being taken up by a lot of conservatives across the country, conservatives on the Hill, is kind of a great. So we see on the left, they very much have an agenda. They very much have an economic agenda, and I think this is a great pushback against that, saying, look, no, this is really leveling the playing field. You want to talk about leveling the playing field? Let's level the playing field. Let's release the middle class from the stranglehold that this crony capitalism has on the economy, and it's very interesting to see. Corporate profits are skyrocketing, but yet the economy is stagnant, and job growth is stagnant as well. And it's a big part of that is because of programs like the Export-Import Bank.
What do you think is going to happen? When is the reauthorization? Does it come up before September? Does it come over the next couple months, or when?
Well, they could reauthorize it now. It'll probably come closer to the September 30th deadline. Again, you're going to see proposals to reform it, but to ultimately reauthorize it, this is certainly gaining steam. Your folks can read about it on our website, and certainly there's members out there members of Congress that are getting out and speaking against this. Fingers crossed that this really is the effort gets ramped up, and this is ultimately taken over the finish line and not reauthorized. But again, it's going to be an uphill battle. Speaking very frankly, it's going to be an uphill battle. There's a lot of money on the other side. There's a lot of time and a lot of effort that's going to be spent on keeping this going. And as you said, it's kind of, folks are going to say, well, we've been doing it for so long, let's just keep going.
Cameron, before I let you go, and listen, I am really glad. I like this topic. So some viewers and listeners, it's not sexy, but I find it sexy. This is the second or third time you keep saying there's a lot of money on the other side, which makes you wonder, do some of these congressional people, senators, congressmen, the administration, maybe they got some of their buddies, like a Solyndra or some other companies out there, their buddies are getting money, so let's reauthorize it so they can get more money. Or is that too conspiratorial?
Well, no. Look, the bottom line is 2%, again, it's 2% of exports are financed by Export-Import Bank. Very politically motivated criteria for picking who is the 2%. And, for example, the Export-Import Bank has openly called solar and wind projects a top priority.
Oh, my word.
This is a political, cronyist way to further an agenda. Very much as the Obama administration continues to do. So, look, let's throw down the gauntlet and say enough is enough. You say you want to grow the economy. You say you want a level playing field, an equal opportunity. Well, sure. I think conservatives would back you on this. And here's a great way to start, Mr. President. By the way, you were against this when you were a candidate in 2008. Deliver on your promise.
Hey, Cameron, real quick. So. You just say there's going to be a reauthorization. Where do you think it's going to head towards now? You think it's going to get reauthorized?
I hope not. I can't say whether one way or another what's going to happen, but I certainly hope not, and I would encourage folks to read about it, to educate themselves, and then to pick up the phone and educate. There might be a lot of members that might not know exactly the ins and outs of it, and again, just rubber stamp it because some lobbyist comes in and says, oh yeah, this is great, it's really going to help out your district, not giving the full story.
That's exactly right. That's a good one. Hey, Cameron Seward with the Heritage Foundation, the program manager out there. Listen, I like this topic. Let's do it again real soon, my friend. Thank you for coming on today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, brother. And coming up next, David Williams from the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. The Export-Import Bank and Republicans and Democrats both keep continuing to reauthorize it. And yet this is like an unglorified version, as I said, of the Fed. And this is kind of what we saw back in 2008 with the financial debacle. When are we ever going to get things straight? Back in a few moments This is the Ed Dean Radio Show.
Age 14, they got you down on your knees. So polite, we're busy still saying please.
With an SRN News Business Brief, I'm Andrew Stewart. AAA giving some welcome news to motorists.
In its monthly forecast, the Auto Club says the average price of $3.69 a gallon for gas likely is at or very near its peak for this spring. AAA expects prices to decline heading towards Memorial Day as gasoline production outpaces demand. The price isn't expected to top last year's peak of $3.79 a gallon. Keith Peters, SRN News.
The court's decision means that a rule adopted by the EPA in 2011 to limit emissions from plants in more than 24 Midwestern and southern states can take effect. The pollution drifts into air above states along the Atlantic coast, and the EPA has struggled to devise a way to control that. Power companies in several states sued to block the rule from taking effect, and a federal appeals court in Washington agreed with them in 2012. Bob Agnew, SRN News.
The Commerce Department says growth slowed to a 0.1% annual rate during the first quarter of 2014. It was the weakest since the end of 2012 and down from a 2.6% growth rate in the October to December quarter of last year. Consumer spending increased at a 3% rate. However, that gain was dominated by a 4.4% rise in spending on services, reflecting higher utility bills. Payroll processor ADP says private employers added 220,000 jobs last month, the most since November of last year and up from 209,000 in March. According to the report, most of the hiring took place in service industries such as retail, transportation, and professional services. Construction firms added 19,000 jobs, while manufacturing added just 1,000.
The price of oil below $100 a barrel for the first time in 3 weeks. This comes as U.S. economic growth reportedly stalls in the first quarter. Benchmark U.S. crude for June delivery dropped $1.54 in New York. With business, I'm Andrew Stewart.
We hold these truths to be self-evident.
In the land of the free and the home of the brave, Americans today are a little less free. I'm Shannon Gessling, and we are Southeastern Legal Foundation. Since 1976, Southeastern Legal Foundation has taken on the tough fights, protecting property rights, free speech, economic liberty, and holding government accountable when it goes too far, just like our friend Ed Dean does every day. Learn more at southeasternlegal.org.
Ranger Station, Ranger speaking.
Yeah, hi. I'd like to report a bear sighting.
Location.
In the forest near the side of the road.
No need for alarm, sir. The forest is where bears live.
But this was no ordinary bear.
No ordinary bear?
Yeah, 1 second I'm having a smoke taken into view. Next thing I know, I am face to face with Smokey Bear.
Let me guess, Smokey had a tip for you.
He did. He must have seen me toss my cigarette on the ground. He told me never to do that because it only takes one spark to start a wildfire.
He's a smart bear. Did you know that 9 out of 10 wildfires are caused by humans? That means 9 out of 10 wildfires can be prevented.
That's what Smokey said. I had no idea.
That's why Smokey's famous, and you're not.
Good point.
If you see someone in danger of starting a wildfire, step in and make a difference, because 9 out of 10 wildfires are caused by humans. Brought to you by Smokey Bear, the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council. Learn more at smokeybear.com.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
All right, more of the Ed Dean Radio Show, the Export-Import Bank. You know what I would like to export with the import bank? Export all those Congress guys that keep reauthorizing it, you know what I'm saying? David Williams, my dear close personal friend, he follows a lot of this. You've seen him on Fox Business News, on Convito, He is with the Washington Taxpayers Advocacy Group, the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. Their contact information is protectingtaxpayers.org. I want to get into Obamacare, Republicans talking about fixing it. I want to talk about economic growth, which was pretty much, I don't know, recessionary type of, awful. But follow me this Export-Import Bank here, or I mean, how has this thing's been around since 1934, and we continue to reauthorize it? I just had Cameron Seward on from the Heritage Foundation. Tell me all the things that I've heard that, you know what? I heard all this back in 2008. We're bailing out companies like TARP. We're making sure, like Boeing, companies that can already afford to make a profit, and we're continuing to fund these companies. I don't get this.
Well, that's it, Ed. I mean, the Export-Import Bank came around in the 30s as part of the New Deal. And what happens with a government program is once you create it, it never goes away. I mean, you talk about ag subsidies, you name it, and the Export-Import Bank is a great example of that, but it's also a great example of corporate welfare, cronyism, whatever you want to call it. Basically, it's propping up companies like Boeing. It's these foreign countries and companies get these really low-interest loans to buy aircraft from Boeing. And what happens, and here's a real life scenario of what happened was, there was a route between New York and India that Delta was serving, and they were charging, let's say, $2,000 a ticket. Well, Air India comes in, they get a super great loan from the Export-Import Bank, and they're able to offer tickets at $1,000. So they drove Delta off of that route because it was subsidized by the taxpayer. So that's the real life. Those are the real life implications of the Export-Import Bank. And guess what? The Republicans have done very little to stop the Export-Import Bank from growing, from being an entity, and it doesn't make any sense. And the reason we're talking about it now is that its authorization is up on September 30th, which happens to be my birthday, but I don't want to talk too much about that.
That's okay. TARP fell on September the 16th, which was my birthday, so it was another holiday for me too.
So there's an opportunity here, and we're hoping that Paul Ryan and the Republicans say, enough is enough and get rid of this thing, because it's an issue that crosses party lines, because it's corporate welfare, and the lefties hate corporate welfare, the righties hate corporate welfare. So why can't we get rid of this darn thing?
One of my favorite shows is the Shark Tank. You ever seen that?
Oh, absolutely.
I'm a huge fan of Mark Cuban. I'm a huge fan of a lot of these guys, especially the chicks from the QVC.
David Sterling?
Oh, yeah. No, that's Donald Sterling.
Oh, Donald.
Yeah, no, this is that. I'm a huge fan of Cuban and these guys. But what's funny is I watch this show religiously because they're venture capitalists. You must go in there to prove that it's worthy to get their money. You know what?
Yeah.
Why don't we just replace these people and just go to the federal government and continue to allow them to be venture capitalism? And what's funny about it is I wrote on the show my worth. I just have a few congressmen that can throw me some bones here, and I'll get some money.
Well, that's it. And if we don't have a political party that's willing to stand up to this, what do we have? I mean, I understand there are differences of opinion between Republicans and Democrats, but geez, why can't we get Republicans to have a little bit of backbone and get rid of this? Hey, let's start with this, Ed. This one program, the Export-Import Bank, and let's just take it from there, okay?
What's funny about this is I wonder, kind of like investigating Fannie and Freddie. Both sides probably have money involved, and we don't want to disclose anything. Isn't there, on both sides, unfortunately, here, maybe they want to continue to reauthorize it because guess what? You have a little bit of a handout for a partner or a friend of yours that will get money in return from getting money to the Export Bank for your vote to reauthorize it.
Well, you're getting close. It is like Fannie and Freddie.
Well, get me closer here.
It's about the money they have to lobby, because Fannie and Freddie, whenever reauthorization would come up, whenever Barney Frank would try to rein in Freddie and Fannie, and he was actually pretty decent with this, but they would send a team of lobbyists up to Capitol Hill and just inundate every office, and that's exactly what the Export-Import Bank does, is they send a team of lobbyists, and that's who they hear from, are these folks. And they hear from Boeing, they hear from these other companies like Caterpillar, which, these big companies, we all know they donate to both parties because they hedge their bet and they want to have friends in both parties. But that's what it is.
Well, so I'm not talking conspiracy then, am I?
No, absolutely not. It's absolutely what happens.
TaxpayerSProtectionAlliance.org is the information. David Williams here, who is the the president of the group. So, are Republicans going to end up waving the white flag on Obamacare? What's the story here?
Well, my concern is that every day that passes that we don't get repeal, we don't get replaced, it's a day lost, and we get closer to full implementation of the bill, and we have less and less opportunity to repeal it. And Kathy McMorris Rogers came out the other day and said that repeal it's not going to happen. Now, her office is saying that she was misquoted, and that isn't really what she said.
Yeah, they're all misquoted. You know that.
Well, exactly. But then they walk back from their quotes. They go, well, let me say that again.
Wow. You know, what's funny is I look at the other way. The more the end of Obama's tenure is, the closer you can get to repeal here.
Well, I think two things need to happen. Obviously, the changing over of the Senate in 2014. And let's be honest, if we elect another Democrat in the White House, I mean, that's the linchpin right there, because what's going to happen is you need a veto-proof Senate and House, and the Senate will never be veto-proof. We'll never be able to get enough Republicans in the Senate. People have asked, what are the chances of the Republicans taking over the Senate? And I use the analogy, the Senate Republicans are like the Philadelphia Phillies bullpen, because right now they have a lead, but no lead is safe for the Republicans, and no lead is safe for the Philadelphia Phillies bullpen, because they'll give up the lead in a heartbeat. So, nothing is set in stone, but those two things have to happen, and that's going to be really difficult.
Is your phone okay? Your phone's breaking up a little bit.
Is that better?
Yeah, just a little bit. It's crackling, but it's not. That was coming from my end, but I guess it's not. Well, the reason why you're talking about the Republican from Washington State, but see, even Mitch McConnell, the Senate Minority Leader, says that the goal is to get the law fixed. I don't want this law fixed. I want to repeal.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
What does fixed mean?
I mean, what is this, a dog? You going to fix it?
The problem is that you can't. I just got that. You can't fix this this bill, because there are so many things attached to it. There are billions of dollars in new bureaucracies that have been created, new grant programs. So you're not going to get rid of those. So what exactly are you going to fix about this that's going to make it better? And basically, you're conceding the point that Obamacare is here and it's going to be fine. Just a few tweaks. That's all he's talking about. So I don't know why not take advantage of the problems with Obamacare, especially in this election cycle. They need to pounce on this and keep talking about this.
Well, I mean, what all can they do? I mean, even if they hold on to the House and pick up seats in the Senate, I mean, do they dismantle the funding of Obamacare? Do they chop away parts? I mean, what happens?
Well, I think that's it. I think it's the funding. You need to chop away the funding of it, and you can't give up fights just because you don't think you're going to win. I mean, what does that say about a principled party? You have to keep fighting regardless of whether you think you're going to win or not. And people criticize the House of Representatives for voting, I think, 40-plus times to repeal Obamacare. I never criticize them for that, because that is their job. If they believe that this is what they were sent to Washington to do, is to get is to repeal Obamacare, whether it's 40 votes, 400 votes, that's their job, is to vote on things and not to go, well, the Senate will never vote on it, so we should. I call BS on that. You vote on it because that's what you believe.
You know, I'm reading a lot of poll numbers here. You know, Carville was on with, was it Greta Van Susteren? I think it was one Washington ABC poll said that 53 to 39 says they would rather see Republicans in control to counterbalance President Obama. And then there's another story in Real Clear Politics that says another poll where slightly of the American people trust the Dems, that the Republicans on the economy, on health care, but then in the same sentence, the article that says, but they're not going to vote for the Dems this year.
Well, no, and I think what we're having is we have 4-year election cycles for parties. And let me back that up, is that in 2006, the Republicans lost the majority in the House. The Democrats took over. 4 years after that, 2010, people said, you know something, the Democrats aren't doing a darn thing. Let's go with the Tea Party. Let's go with the Republicans.
Right.
It swung back towards the Republicans. Well, guess what, Ed? 2014 is 4 years after 2010, and this is what we're hearing. is that people have said, okay, we gave you 4 years. It's an off election year. It's not a presidential election year. So let's go with another party. Let's see if the Republicans, if we give them the Senate, what they can do. And boy, if the Republicans win the Senate this year, they have a huge responsibility not to mess around and do stupid things, but to get right down to business.
Does the president, do you believe, if you're a Democrat, do you invite the president to come into your now? If it's a swing district, now of course it's a big district, you don't worry about it. But I mean, a swing district. I think they got to double down. I mean, the reason why I'm asking all this is because this is not uncommon. The president has always been in the 40 percentile of his numbers out there. I mean, I know he may be around the low 40s right now, but I mean, he was in the low to mid 40s around re-election time. I mean, I think the Democrats are used to this, and they still end up winning. What makes this election different then?
Well, I don't think you bring the president around because he is not going to need you. You really don't need him. And I think this is an election year where you campaign on your own, whether you're Mary Landrieu, whether you're Mark Pryor in Louisiana and Arkansas, those two Democrats, is you do not bring the face of Obamacare into your state, into your district. And there's no need to suck up to the president right now because he's gone. He's gone in 2 years. What you need to do is to start to make that transition to Hillary, to whomever will be running. So there's no need. There is absolutely no need to bring that albatross around your neck into your campaign.
There's an article at the Washington Post by Aaron Blake. It says that the White House, this came out to a couple days back. It says the White House's Obamacare victory lap is looking more like a false start. Now they talk about all the people that are signed up and who's paid and hasn't paid. But then again, overall, Americans disapprove it by about 4 to 6 points. They say it's even more telling when you break it down. Americans say 50 to 41 that the implementation of the law has been worse than expected. 44 to 24 says the healthcare system is getting worse and then getting better as a result of Obamacare. 29 to 14 also in the other areas that the healthcare is getting, the quality of care is getting worse. 47 to 8 that healthcare costs are increasing. 50. I mean, the numbers don't show that a drastic change from Obamacare will ensure this. Now, that can be a talking point for Democrats in case they lose. They can sit back and say, well, we didn't have the full implementation of Obamacare, and that's, okay, fine, I'll give you that one. But the bottom line is that they're already talking now that we think that the numbers will turn around because why? Because the full implementation of Obamacare will take place. But what they're not talking about also in that area is that if that's the case, why are they 38 areas that they kicked Obamacare down the road with the employer mandate and everything else? I mean, this is going to be about who could be the best snake oil salesman here in the upcoming elections.
Ed, they have to believe the numbers will get better. They can't admit that this is a failure, that it's a failure to implement, that it's a failure to sell it, that it was a failure for the website. They can't admit that because these are guys and gals that voted for the legislation, so they have to believe that what they did was the right thing. So that's why they'll never admit it. And what I find just amazing is whenever a party loses an election, they take the wrong message from it. And whenever a party wins an election, they take the wrong message from it. And we're going to see that this year. If the Republicans take over the Senate, if the Republicans increase the majority in the House, do you really think that's a reaffirmation of Republican principles? I think that's more a rejection of Democrats and people frustrated with Democrats. So there's always misreading of election results.
Real quick, the Republicans posted one thing. Articles from other blogs and newspapers post that the Republicans are dead wrong about who has paid on the enrollments. Who are we supposed to believe right now? Is it still too early to tell?
It's really too early to tell. And one thing that really concerns me is that at the end of March, we had that miraculous 7.1 million number of people that had signed up. Right. And the problem is, Ed, is that when you watch, and I hate to use this word, the mainstream media, when you watch NBC, ABC, CBS, that's the number that people see. People see there's a 2-minute story, or not even that long at times, and they see 7.1 million people have signed up. And then they go on to the next story. And that's what remains inside of people's heads. They don't dive down. And that's why news channels like Fox, they get deeper into the numbers and they try to look at, well, exactly who was paid, how many of these are Medicaid. So people people rest of they just look at it superficially.
You know, real quick, as funny is when there were less people signing on back in October, November, December, they couldn't tell you the numbers. Now there was a rush. I mean, man, we're crashing the website. All these people are signing up, and yet, guess what? We can tell you the numbers, Dave. So, all right, more on the other side of the break with my good buddy David Williams from the Taxpayers Protection Lines. Get his phone fixed. Get him an Obama phone. We'll get back to him talking about the incredibly low numbers from the GDP for the first quarter. Back in a few moments.
Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Clap along if you feel like that.
This is SRN News.
Judicial Watch obtained the emails through a Freedom of Information Act request and found communications that Republicans describe as the smoking gun. Conservatives have criticized the Obama administration for being untruthful about the U.S. Embassy attack. As reported by USA Today and other news outlets, in one email, White House official Ben Rhodes lists goals for explaining the attack. One of the goals is to blame the video. Another is to reinforce the president's strength. Greg Clugston, SRN News, the White House. The email shows a White House official helping prepare Susan Rice for TV interviews on the weekend after the attack that left 4 Americans dead in Benghazi.
This document was not about Benghazi.
That was spokesman Jay Carney during a tense White House briefing. He insisted the talking points were about the general situation in the Muslim world. Republicans have criticized the administration for suggesting the Benghazi violence resulted from an internet video. Greg Clugston, SRN News, the White House.
New York Democrat Charles Schumer called raising the minimum wage an issue of basic fairness.
The minimum wage has failed to keep up with inflation and lost a third of its value. That is not a fair shot for Americans.
But Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said Democrats were ignoring studies that say raising the minimum wage will hurt job creation.
They don't seem to care that about 6 in 10 Americans oppose a bill like this if it means losing hundreds of thousands of American jobs.
Democrats and Republicans vow to keep up their respective fights both for and against the higher minimum wage. Linda Kenyon, SRN News, Capitol Hill.
Supporters say it's all about saving American jobs.
If we don't pass this bill, the business will go to foreign insurance companies.
Pennsylvania's Charlie Dent.
This bill represents a very narrow change to the law that saves jobs. This bill simply mends the law. It does not end the law.
The measure passed 268 to 150, with 60 Democrats joining Republicans. Wally Hines, SRN News, Capitol Hill.
More details at srnnews.com.
You do it like this.
All right, I am your white privileged radio talk show host, and no, my last name is not Sterling here. It is the Ed Dean Radio Show. Remember, we're all racist. We don't like anything the president or liberals do, so I've been elevated to white privilege. My other white privilege radio host today, I'm my good buddy here on Talk Radio, Fox Business News, and his group is the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. The contact information is protectingtaxpayers.org. So the first quarter, 0.1. In fact, who was it today? Was it oh, man, who was the economy? It was. I was watching CNBC. I don't know if it was Moody. Said even if he took away some of the other numbers, it was a negative growth rating in the first quarter.
And do you notice that there's always an excuse for these anemic numbers of saying, well, weather played a factor in it, that there was some really brutal weather the last few months. You know something? If we had a really strong economy, we would get through the bad weather. And I don't know if you saw this yesterday. I'm sure you did. Is that China is now overtaking us as the world's largest economy and strongest economy.
Yeah, I read
and that should be, wow, talk about a wake-up call. If that's not a wake-up call for Congress, I don't know what is.
You know what we need? If the cold weather has slowed the growth down, then we should be actively supporting global warming then.
Or just move everyone to Florida.
Yeah, I mean, what's the excuse? Oh, it was the weather. I mean, it was too hot. I mean, yeah, that was like Rick Santelli from CNBC says, yeah, they'll blame the weather. I mean, there is some interesting remarks or when you listen to economists talk about the economy, I mean, you had a 14% drop. I mean, when was the last time you've seen that? It's been years.
Yeah.
When it came to first-time home buyers, there's been an influx by a 0.34% point. That's not over one on certain of consumer confidence or other areas. I mean, we're still, quote, as it says in the recovery. I mean, I read the other day about was it Stan Greenberg and James Carville? I think this article was in National Journal just a couple days back. Are advising Democrats not to use the R word, recovery. How about that, huh?
Well, and here's something that would help us regain sort of the momentum, and it's the corporate tax rate. We've talked about this before. The U.S. has the highest corporate tax rate in the world. China's our corporate tax rate is 39%. China, 25%. So the country, the communist, socialist country of China has a lower corporate tax rate. Ireland is 17%. Apple has headquarters in Ireland, not because there's some great natural resources there that Apple is using. It's because of the tax rate. Liberals don't get this, is that companies go to countries that have low taxes so they can produce, and that's what we need to do in this country. Corporations aren't going to stay in this country out of the goodness of their own heart. They do it because they want to make a profit, and making a profit means more money for the company, more money for employees, more employees in the company, and more revenue to the government.
Now let me float something by you. If you raise the dividends tax, which they did, so now that means people are like, well, I don't know if I want to invest in this company because, I mean, I just got to pay more tax. I mean, they got a nice dividend, but I mean, for crying out loud. And then you got the capital gains tax increase there. You get the high corporate tax. And then, of course, we create all these rules and regulations, whether it's through OSHA, EPA. So initially we enhance regulations to chase businesses to do offshore business or go overseas, and then when they decide to do it, we sit back and call them unpatriotic, and we want to go after them even more.
Well, because the folks on the other side, on the left, don't think that businesses will change their behavior. They don't understand that businesses and corporations change their behavior based upon regulations, based upon taxation, and we're in an economy and in a world where you can leave. You can leave the U.S. You can go to Ireland. You can do business in Eastern European country that has a low tax rate. It's easy. It's still easy to sell your goods here in the U.S. if you're based somewhere else.
So let's get back to the GDP. I mean, what is, besides the weather, what else are they blaming this on?
Well, I haven't heard any other reason besides that. I think it's just we're a stagnant economy. We're not producing goods, and we're not, as you mentioned, the home buyers. I mean, there's a 14% drop in home buyers. I mean, that should be a huge concern, because we've talked about this before, Ed, is that we've seen certain sectors of the economy start to get going, and home buying was one of them about 8 months ago. But to see this, boy, that's the canary in the coal mine.
Well, I mean, I hear these guys in the liberal left that then they like try to switch around to Obamacare. Hey, Obamacare is going to create jobs, and of course they're trying to blame Republicans, but yet they really can't blame Republicans anything here. And it's going to be interesting to watch the spin. By the way, I haven't seen the media really cover this story about GDP. I mean, 0.1%, folks. That is a top of the line news-making story, and yet it is barely even being talked about.
It's barely being talked about, and this is one of those things that the Republicans should talk about. And this is, and government doesn't create jobs. Government is a pass-through for money, and by the time your taxes come to Washington and leave, there's very little left that even has an opportunity to get back into the economy.
Did you see where the Fed chair, Janet Yellen? I mean, when the economy's doing better, it's weird. The bond buying back program from the Fed, or in other words, they're pumping money into the economy there. Now, this is really weird. How I'm going to let me see if I can straighten this out for the average listener. The Fed says for the last years, hey, we need to have this bond buying program. In other words, they're buying up debt from their own friends or associated with. They're like family members. I can spend an hour on this. So in order to pump up the economy, so they've been doing this, and yet what's weird about it is they say that's one of the areas why. By the way, it's cheap money invested into the economy, and businesses should not be taking it. Having said that, is this the first or second round of pullback that they're not going to be pumping more money in the economy? And she says even with the economic numbers, we're still not going to be pumping more money in the economy, which is fine with me. I don't want to pump any more money in the economy. It's going to be interesting to see how they spin all this.
No, and you're right. You know, we've had how many rounds of quantitative easing, and it's just it hasn't worked. So I guess what Janet Yellen is saying is that enough is enough. I mean, that's actually a positive sign that they're going to stop doing this. But what's coming next? That's my concern. Is what's coming next after this, and are they planning on another sort of stimulus package? I mean, we are hearing about a transportation bill. They want to do a mega transportation bill, about $320 billion by the end of the year, probably starting in August or September. They'll be crafting it. But again, Ed, this is what they think is that if they spend enough money on transportation projects, this is what's going to get the economy going. So I think that this is going to be the next stimulus, is this transportation bill.
Well, my point is this is a little oxymoron here. I mean, if the numbers show that economic numbers are not there, and they are not, why would you pull back money then?
Well, you can't have it both ways, though, Ed, because you don't want them to continue to do this because it hasn't been working. So let's just appreciate what she's doing at this point and what the Fed is doing at this point, and hope that they're not just lying in wait for another plan.
Well, I mean, yeah, but even she has talked about how we need to have more economic stimulus. So I mean, okay, so I take this back. They're not pulling all the money out. They're only going to pull like 10% or 20% at the time. We know that these job numbers, which are still weak, we know that there isn't going to be any type of more stimulus passing here. So, and I think that, I mean, when you listen to the Obama people out there, I mean, because when you look at the numbers of the articles posted by the AP and the Washington Times and the Wall Street Journal, that most businesses aren't going to hire because of what they're going to see with Obamacare and everything else, and yet the administration can't give you at least a realistic answer on why the economy slowed down. I mean, heck, I'd be happy they even made up something.
Well, and going to get back to Obamacare, like you were saying, is that there's still no certainty from business about Obamacare because there's been these one-year delays, but they don't know if that one-year delay is going to be extended, and if it's not, they're going to take a major hit. And we know, Ed, that businesses don't plan from year to year. They plan for 5 years, 10 years. They have to look long-term as to what they're going to – so they need certainty. Businesses need certainty in the economy and what their expenses are and regulations. And I think that's why we're stagnating, is they don't see that type of certainty as to the future and the direction of the economy.
Yeah, I mean, I've always said, for example, let's say that Walmart wants, and I'm going to just use them as an example. Let's say Walmart's goal is to open up 100 stores this year. But because of Obamacare, because of maybe the high tax rate, they have no idea what's going to happen. Instead, they only open up 30 stores. Now, people are sitting back going, well, look at these greedy idiots here. They're sitting on, all these companies are sitting on $3.1 trillion worth of cash. Yeah, and the reason why is because Walmart sits back and says, well, we're not going to open up these 100 stores. Instead, we're going to open up 30, because when you spend money, then your profit goes down until the company makes a profit for the new stores opening up. In other words, we spend money out, it takes our profitability shares down than what it is. But Walmart, all these companies are sitting back because, again, I just don't think they have any clue what's going to happen until the employer mandate. I mean, if Walmart were to know, and other companies were to know, that Obama, and rightfully so probably will do this, will decide to kick the can down the road with the employer mandate and extend it for another 2 years, guess what? I think businesses would hire right now until the full term of when they have to implement Obamacare comes through. I think they'd probably hire.
Well, and I wish people on the left would look at this issue and think, okay, what if it was me? What if it was my household that right now I'm bringing in, let's say, $2,000 a month, and I pay $100 in taxes. Well, in September, that might be $200 in taxes. I don't know, but it might be. So I need to plan and make sure that I don't overextend myself in my expenses. And that's why we need for people and the liberals to think about it in that way, because when they talk about a corporation, a dog whistle goes off, and they freak out, and they say corporations are bad, corporations are evil, but think about it yourself in your own household.
Well, how about this? I mean, everybody keeps saying these days that well, the reason why they're sitting on all these cash, of course, liberals don't know math. They keep saying, well, because it's a bunch of greedy corporate interests out there, and all these guys are associated with the Tea Party and the Republicans and conservatives, and that's the reason why they don't want to implement Obamacare, because they're all greedy. And I'm like, well, wait a second. If that's the case, then where was the greed 10 years ago? Remember 25 years ago with Gecko and Wall Street and Charlie Sheen and Reagan? It was nothing about corporate greed. If that's the case, then none of these guys would hire.
What happens to non-greedy corporations? They go bankrupt. I mean, if you're not in it to make a buck, then why are you in it? And you're not going to be in it for long.
Well, that's why I keep asking the questions. Why is it that a company...
Well, Ed, you remember the old joke, if someone sells a chair for $2, it costs them $3 to actually produce it. They go, well, how do you stay in business? Volume, volume, volume.
That's exactly right. Or or like I said before, it cost them $9. They sell it for $10, and liberals go, "We need to tax you more money. You made a profit." Yeah, but my profitability and my profit margin is not the way it should be for me to expand anymore.
Exactly.
All right, well, what are we going to see here? I mean, is this the Dems are all saying this is a blip, 0.1 economic growth. They're saying this is a blip. What are you thinking?
Well, I think it's really bad timing considering we're approaching the elections. But we're going to have more economic indicators, and we're going to see this again, and we see it both parties. The Republicans are going to amplify the bad news. The Democrats are going to amplify the good news. And people know in their hearts just how bad unemployment is, how bad the economy is, because we know that our neighbor isn't working. We know that we haven't had a pay increase in years. So I hope people cut through all of the nonsense from both parties and understand that the economy is not performing. And come November, it's going to take a miracle for the economy to really get chugging again. And Congress will be doing nothing about that because they're chicken. And they're not going to be doing a lot of legislating between now and then. They're not going to be cutting taxes. They're not going to be doing anything bold that businesses are going to say, whoa, look at this. We're taking strides forward. So I don't see a lot happening. And guess what? It's their own fault.
Well, like I said, it's quite interesting that the poll numbers, when you read the Washington Post poll and ABC News, 57 to almost 60% still believe we're in a recession. And the beauty about it, what's funny about this is you watch Carville and Greenberg and these guys and Magala all coming out telling these, and NPR all grouping together, telling Democrats, hey, I would avoid using the recovery word out there.
Well, the other R word, recession. I mean, maybe both start with R. Remember that.
Well, listen, I think it's great. And I think it's great to talk about the economy. And listen, you want to blame the Republicans for not passing another stimulus jobs bill? That's fine. The Democrats aren't even talking about this. I mean, to me, it's got to be more than about Obamacare. I think the Democrats should bring up the issue of the economy because I want to see how they're going to walk themselves off of this plank and see where they're going, because I'd love to have the argument. I'd love to have the discussion.
And they're slowly backing themselves into a corner because they're running out of things to talk about. They can't talk about Obamacare. They can't talk about the economy. So what are they going to talk about?
I don't know. I don't know. So anyways, hey, my good buddy David Williams, I appreciate you coming on today, bro.
Thanks, Ed.
All right, coming up next, a little bit about Benghazi. Chris Salcedo from the Blaze Radio Network. And to the Republicans, by the way, Lenny Curry, the RPOF chair, I got the call last night. He is stepping down. Thank gosh he's stepping down. But the question is, what does this do for Rick Scott? I don't know. Can anything be done for Rick Scott? I don't know. The guy's spending $5 million and he's still getting beat up in the polls. Depending what poll, by the way, there's a poll out there that shows Rick Scott's up by 1. We'll discuss this all coming up in the next hour. The 2 fastest hours anywhere in Florida Talk Radio. This is the Ed Dean Radio Show.
With SRN Sports, I'm Michael Harrington. The NBA playoffs rolled on yesterday. Dwight Howard had 22 points and 14 rebounds as the Rockets beat Portland 108-98 to pull within 3 games to 2 in the series. Howard says they got to play with confidence if they're going to win number 6 in Portland.
It's going to be tough. Nothing in life is easy, and we want to earn it. So we got to go out there and play like we believe we can win.
San Antonio Spurs have grabbed a 3-2 lead in the conference quarterfinals. Tony Parker had 23 points, and the Spurs never trailed in the 109-103 victory over Dallas. Toronto coughed up a 26-point lead before downing Brooklyn 115-113 for the 3-2 series advantage there. And the LA Lakers are looking for a coach. Mike D'Antoni has resigned after less than 2 seasons at the post in Los Angeles. This is SRN Sports. There was NHL playoff action yesterday as well. The New York Rangers earned the right to take on the Pittsburgh Penguins in the Eastern Conference semifinals. Rangers are 6-0 in Game 7s at Madison Square Garden. They scored a 2-1 victory over Philadelphia yesterday. Minnesota rallied for a 5-4 overtime win at Colorado. The Wild move on to meet the defending Stanley Cup champion Blackhawks. The LA Kings outscored San Jose 5-1 to advance to an All-Southern California second round. Kings get the Anaheim Ducks next. Major League Baseball yesterday in the American League, it was the Tigers over the White Sox 5-1, Angels 7, Cleveland 1. The A's beat Texas 12-1. It was Kansas City 4, Toronto 2. Seattle at the Yankees, Tampa Bay at Boston. Those two were rained out. In the National League yesterday, St. Louis 9, Brewers 3, Miami over the Braves 9-3, Cubs 9, Cincinnati 4, Arizona top Colorado 5-4 in 10 innings, San Francisco 3, San Diego 2, Mets at Philadelphia. That one was rained out. This is SRN Sports.
WEJF Palm Bay, WKFA St. Catherine.
With SRN News, I'm Rich Thomason in Washington. Looks like it was a natural gas explosion that wrecked a county jail in Pensacola, Florida last night, killing 2 inmates and injuring as many as 150 people. The Lynchburg, Virginia city manager says 50,000 gallons of oil are missing from 3 rail tankers. It derailed, exploded in flames, wound up in the James River yesterday. Authorities don't know how much of the crude burned and how much actually spilled into the river. Crews battling that smoky wildfire in the foothills east of Los Angeles, bracing for a return of gusty winds that initially pushed the fire toward more than 1,600 homes. The latest report on consumer spending has put a smile on economist Hugh Johnson's face.
It's just very, very good news. Consumer spending, now it doesn't sound like a big number, but it's up 0.9% in March.
But April brought more pink slips.
We saw layoffs in the month of April up 17% from what they were a month ago. Over 40,000 job cuts were announced.
John Challenger with the outplacement firm Challenger Gray and Christmas. Also at srnnews.com, it's something that goes back to the earliest days of the Republic.
65 times proclamations have been issued calling for a National Day of Prayer.
Shirley Dobson chairs the National Day of Prayer Task Force.
34 out of 44 presidents have signed proclamations for National Days of Prayer. They included George Washington and Abraham Lincoln.
And this year, Barack Obama. Dobson speaking today at an observance on Capitol Hill on this National Day of Prayer. This is SRN News. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell says if he loses Kentucky's Republican primary, he'll back his primary challenger.
Senator McConnell is favored to win Kentucky's GOP primary, but he has been in a tough race against businessman Matt Bevin. The Lexington Herald-Leader reports McConnell agreed to a request from the Kentucky GOP to sign a pledge committing to support the eventual Republican nominee. A spokeswoman for Senator McConnell says in her words, from day one, Senator McConnell has committed to supporting the winner of the primary election. She went on to say, the stakes of this election are too high to give President Obama another vote in the U.S. Senate. While Senator McConnell made the pledge, Bevin's campaign has yet to respond. Lindy Kenyon, SRN News.
A Western Pennsylvania church has been collecting money to help pay for the defense of a 16-year-old boy charged in a mass stabbing at a nearby high school. More details at srnnews.com.
We are sorry for your pain. Sorry for the death. Israel's kindness. And he insisted that the war would not end or the threat from a conflict
All right, hour number 2 of the Ed Dean Radio Show. I am your political GPS. I know where some of you liberals have been, where you are now, and where some of you really need to go. 2 hours a day is all we do, Monday through Friday, 2 to 4, here on the East Coast of Florida, but we're here all throughout the state. And thank you so much for tuning in. You made us the number 1 political radio talk show host in the state of the Ed Dean Radio Show. The email address is eddeanradio@gmail.com, eddeanradio@gmail.com. Twitter is at eddeanradio.com, and facebook.com/eddeanradio, or just look for Ed Dean. I chat with many of you during the radio show. Instead of you trying to email me, we just do it through Facebook. And that way I get a quicker response to many of you, back and forth, and we have a good chat. If you want to watch me live on the air, just go to eddeanradio.com, eddeanradio.com. Listen, I don't want to Richard Minitor, I think, is going to join us on Monday, author of the book Eyes on Target about the history of the Navy SEALs, also author of the book Leading from Behind, Losing Bin Laden, Shadow Wars. My good friend, he's going to join us to talk about more about this Benghazi story. I don't want to get into too much of the wheres and ins and outs and wins and import, export. I mean, let me just all I want to talk about is that one of the questions you have to ask is, why does nobody care about this anymore? I mean, really, if Hillary Clinton wanted to come out and said what she said famously just a couple years ago,
saying that was not the fact, but and the American people could have known that within days, and they didn't know that.
With all due respect, the fact is we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make?
Now, that's pretty much what the media can say right now and get away with it. What difference does it make? I mean, the story's almost 2 years old. Nobody wants to talk about it. I mean, we killed bin Laden, we saved GM. Enough said. Let's move on with the topics out there. You know what? There was discussion back. Remember the Iraq War? There was discussion out there from the left that sat back and said, listen, we need to find out what got us into this war. What information? Was it Bush, Cheney, Halliburton, all the conspiracies out there that were going to do dredge oil companies, and that the oil companies, and by the way, it was going to pay for the war, which shows that it has not. And his buddies at Halliburton, and what was going on? We need to have an investigation. And, of course, the Republicans came out and says, hey, listen, we're already here. Let's just find out how we deal with it and get out of it. Now, I will tell you, as a conservative, both arguments have merit. As a conservative, I said, listen to many of my other conservative friends and Republican friends out there. Listen, don't knock this issue out during the Iraq War. The bottom line is I know we're here, but I want to know what got us into this mess. When we probably should have stayed in Afghanistan and found bin Laden then, in a war we didn't need, and if we were going to go after somebody, why do we not go after Iran? Because remember, you're either with us or against us, and remember, Iran is the #1 state-sponsored terrorist country in the world, but yet we went after Iraq. That didn't make sense. But even I, as a former news guy, I am all up for transparency. I wanted to know what and how in the world did this happen, how we got into the Iraq War. I had no problem with that. Of course, the Democrats wanted to do it so they could make Bush embarrassed because they lost seats back in 2002. They lost the presidency in 2004. And, of course, the American people were just ticked off in 2006 about what was going on, and so they voted the Republicans out. I don't have any problem of finding what happened and how we got into the Iraq War. But I do it as a transparency issue. I know both sides want to do this because it's based on partisan, partisanship out there. I understand that. Some of it isn't. I mean, I think some of the guys in the Tea Party are dead on to find out what did Lois Lane Lerner and the prophet Elijah Muhammad Cummings know about this deal together and how we're going to silence Tea Party groups. I want to know what happened with the IRS. I want to know what happened with the Fast and Furious. I want to know about all this. I mean, I don't care if this had to proceed with Bush and Cheney. I want to know why people were killed. See, folks, again, to me, it is about the issues. It is not about the partisan politics out there. Now, if you want to play the partisan politics, heck yeah, we can spend this all day and, well, they did it and they did it and they did it. I want to know, how did we get into this mess? Because the reason why is, if we don't find out why, we'll do it again. But the bottom line is when it comes to Benghazi, I want to know what happened out there. But at the liberal left, we can't do it. Why? Because they know it is an embarrassment. They know it's a cover-up, and they don't want to talk about it. Listen, let me expand beyond this. I want to know, for example, the bank debacle, the housing market. I want to know why the George Bush and the Republicans, along with many Democrats, support the TARP. How do we get into this mess? Why did we get into this mess? How do we not get into this mess again? I want to know how the billions of dollars were wasted on stimulus, sending out billions of dollars to checks to congressional districts that didn't even register on the map, how dead people were getting Social Security checks. I'm all for an investigation. Do you know it's gotten so bad politically that some of those, excluding maybe most of the Tea Party, a lot of the Republicans, they'll sit and defend their guy to the death. You know, I like loyalty, but smart loyalty is the right way to go. And the Democrats are just as bad when it comes to all this. And yet the Democrats will sit here and defend Hillary Clinton. They'll defend Barack Obama. And yet, and I'm a conservative, when Bush was in the White House, I sat back and was critical of the Iraqi war, going, hey, I was critical of the spending. I was critical of the housing bailout. By the way, Barack Obama voted in favor of this. So did Joe Biden. And yet nobody criticizes them. I am all about the issue. I want to know how we got into the Iraq war. I want to know about the information and the intelligence or the lack thereof. I want to know why Benghazi is a cover-up. I want to know why, for example, a housing market, an economy that was flourishing out there, how did this happen? I want to find out with TARP. Well, it's already done. Yeah, and we're doing the same things again. The president's out there telling people we need to still continue to give first-time home buyers that may have a tough time being able to afford it. We still need to be able to give them credit. Why? Because that's what the American dream is about. No, the American dream is about to raise a family, not to be in high debt. And why not Washington promote it? Because that's all they're about. Washington is notorious for a lot of debt. And they promote it pretty heavily. I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And I want to know why, because, and in retrospect, does it really even matter? Because we know why there was a housing debacle. It wasn't because of more government regulation. It was because government regulation was encouraging banks to deregulation, or should I say, deregulate their standards, deregulate themselves. Let me say it one more time. Government was regulating the banks to have the banks deregulate themselves. Remember, if we loaned money out, guess what? It was predatory lending. If we didn't loan money out, it was discriminatory, so you can't win. But it doesn't matter because the government through Fannie and Freddie and the government through all the other areas will bail you out. Well, see, this is the reason why. And by the way, this was done underneath the Republican and the Democratic Congress. I want to know why. How do we get into this mess? And how do we not do it again? I have no problem with an investigation. To my liberal listeners out there, you guys should be embracing with me about investigations, whether it's on the left or on the right. I mean, let me just throw the liberals a bone, technically, for a second. Let me just ask you guys, why were there no, for the most part, I mean, forget Bernie Madoff, why were there no prosecutions from the fallout of the housing scandal? And by the way, all these prosecutions would have happened underneath Barack Obama because he inherited this mess. Where are they? Where is the mess? Where is the arrest? Do you blame it on the Republicans? No, you can't blame. I mean, there were no arrests. And why? I mean, if all these people ripped off the American people, where's the arrest? It's not there. The Republicans should have been calling for hearings on this. Didn't even see that as much. And we act, unfortunately, sometimes there's a difference between the two parties. And in several cases there is. But primarily there's a deeper divide, and rightfully so, from the left, primarily among conservatives, among the 9/12ers, among the patriots, among the Tea Party types, which I love out there. The Rand Paul and the Ted Cruz's and the Mike Lees and the Marco Rubio types out there. Republicans, it's a Democrat, and I understand. Listen, I have no problem with Republicans investigating Benghazi. I have no problems with the Republicans investigating Fast and Furious or the IRS with Lois Lane, Lerner, and all that. I have no problem. Listen, the Democrats, I would have had no problem. I mean, forget the impeach word. Start up an investigation, folks. I would have loved to see what broke down with the intelligence with the Iraq War. I think it was needed. I would have liked to seen it. Not because I'm here to burn Bush, and primarily not because many of you think, well, we're here to burn Obama. Politically, I want to burn the system. No, hear me out. I said politically, I want to burn the system. What I mean burn the system is I want to change it. Burn it down and build something back up. I'm not talking literally burn it. I said politically. How do you do it, Ed? Vote these guys out and put some new people in. If there is ever a time that the left and the right you think would be able to join hands and forget about the partisanship, would be about the investigations. In fact, let's go further, would be more about, hey, why in the blazes does Congress exempt themselves from Obamacare? Great investigative story. I'd love to see. Why do hearings? Why are all these 1,000+ groups, primarily tons of Obama supporters, like the unions and the AARP, the Americans Against Retired People, why are they all asking for an exemption if Obamacare is so great? I think the problem is, Ed, you're asking for investigations. I said investigations, not impeachment. Big difference. I'm not calling for impeachment. I'm calling for investigations. We shouldn't need investigations. Congress just needs to get up there and do what their constitutional duties are. That's to argue and work out the dilemma of passing a budget and protecting this country. No, not protecting its country for poor people or for rich people. We're talking militarily protecting our country. The General Welfare Clause, you guys have totally bastardized in many things, all right? Pardon my language. You totally just misplaced it. And yet, when I talk about this, folks, Congress, it should be enough for Democrats and Republicans to be angry because everything gets dumped on you, the voters out there. You got to pay more taxes, you got to pay more fees, you got to pay more in FICA taxes. There's not enough to go for your retirement out there. You'll never see all your Social Security. Folks, you should be angry about this. Be angry about the system on both sides. You should be wanting to change both sides. No. Congress sits here and gets a fully vested pension. No, we're not angry about that. But if if you worked at the private sector and you found out that the employees that you work with were getting special benefits, but you weren't, you want to know something? You would be in human resources within an hour complaining about this. But when it comes to my taxpayers' money, I don't complain. When it comes to raising my taxes and fees, I don't complain. The voter, and unfortunately, and a lot of times on both sides, are they misguided? I put a lot of the blame on the voter myself. Don't complain to me about this guy or say, Congress. Wait, you continue to vote these people in. Don't itch and complain to me. There is enough out there for both sides to kumbaya, to stand together and sit back and say, hey, we may not agree on an issue of abortion or gay marriage or legalization of medical marijuana or taxes or Obamacare and foreign policy or whatever. But the guys running the show up there and how they get extra special benefits for their back pocket, and yet I work harder. I don't get to take a whole month off in August. I don't get to take a week to 2 weeks off at Christmas. I don't get to take a week to 2 weeks off at the 4th of July. I don't get to take a week to 2 weeks off when it comes to an Easter recess. I don't get a chance to take a month to 2 months off the campaign. For crying out loud. But you guys allow them to get away with it. Shame on many of you voters out there. Shame on you voters out there that won't complain when they jack up my property taxes by $50 a month. But if you jack up my golf rates by $5 a year, guess what? You're complaining. You're there. You're not going to go, hey, open the door. Tuesday night council meeting. Yeah, we want to complain. We're on fixed income. But what about fixed income when it comes to your water rates jacking up, your sewer rates coming up, your usage fees coming up, your millage rate, better known as your property taxes going up? The anger is displaced. I think many of us should be angry at what we see from our state, local, and national politicians. But we don't. So do I really blame Congress, or do I blame you guys? A little bit of both. There's a partnership going on. I don't endorse. Well, okay, let me not sound redundant. I don't want to see all these investigations. There shouldn't be all these investigations. But you want to know something? There should be tons of investigations, and people should be put in the back of a police pickup or a police car. I don't give a flip about Michael Graham in New York, whether he was supported by the Tea Party elites or not. I don't care about Bob McDonnell, who I thought was a decent governor, but if he did wrong, hey, get him. See, I have the guts to say this, and I'm a conservative, but you liberals all know we can talk no wrong about the Obama administration. No, because why? He's the Messiah. He's got to be the one, Neo. It's the Matrix. He's got to be the one. It's what the Oracle told me. There can be no, hey, I mean, it just can't. Really? I mean, really? And yet, there should be complaints left and right, and we don't. There should be, listen, I am willing to sit back and say to all my liberal friends, we could sit back and agree that Congress should not have a fully vested pension and exempt themselves from Congress. There is something that liberals and conservatives could agree on in how Congress acts and behaves. But we can't. Why? Because it's got to be based on the issue of abortion or gay marriage or legalization of drugs or taxes. And yet, I don't care if a Republican, I don't care if it's Michael Graham or McDonald. To me, it doesn't mean anything. If they did wrong, they should be investigated. But heaven forbid it should happen to the Messiah and all his followers up in D.C. and the disciples, better known as the Obama crowd. You know what? When you can get over the nonsense of some of the issues and say, hey, we need to change from Republican to Democrat, we got to change things. You get over the issues and you sit back and say, listen, these guys should not have special strengths and special purses. When you start having that better attitude, things will change in your local and national and state political life. Coming up next, Chris Salcedo from the Blaze Radio Network. This is the Ed Dean Radio Show.
RN News Business Brief. I'm Andrew Stewart. AAA giving some welcome news to motorists.
In its monthly forecast, the Auto Club says the average price of $3.69 a gallon for gas likely is at or very near its peak for this spring. AAA expects prices to decline heading towards Memorial Day as gasoline production outpaces demand. The price isn't expected to top last year's peak of $3.79 a gallon. Keith Peters, SRN News.
The court's decision means that a rule adopted by the EPA in 2011 to limit emissions from plants in more than 24 Midwestern and southern states can take effect. The pollution drifts into air above states along the Atlantic coast, and the EPA has struggled to devise a way to control that. Power companies in several states sued to block the rule from taking effect, and a federal appeals court in Washington agreed with them in 2012. Bob Agnew, SRN News.
The Commerce Department says growth slowed to a 0.1% annual rate during the first quarter of 2014. It was the weakest since the end of 2012 and down from a 2.6% growth rate in the October to December quarter of last year. Consumer spending increased at a 3% rate. However, that gain was dominated by a 4.4% rise in spending on services, reflecting higher utility bills. Payroll processor ADP says private employers added 220,000 jobs last month, the most since November of last year and up from 209,000 in March. According to the report, most of the hiring took place in service industries such as retail, transportation, and professional services. Construction firms added 19,000 jobs, while manufacturing added just 1,000.
The price of oil below $100 a barrel for the first time in 3 weeks. This comes as U.S. economic growth reportedly stalls in the first quarter. Benchmark U.S. crude for June delivery dropped $1.54 in New York. With business, I'm Andrew Stewart.
We hold these truths to be self-evident.
In the land of the free and the home of the brave,
Americans today are a little less free. I'm Shannon Gessling, and we are Southeastern Legal Foundation. Since 1976, Southeastern Legal Foundation has taken on the tough fights, protecting property rights, free speech, economic liberty, and holding government accountable when it goes too far, just like our friend Ed Dean does every day. Learn more at southeasternlegal.org.
All right, we continue to move along. More of the Ed Dean Radio Show. My good buddy, I always love having, in fact, some of our conversations are more funnier off the air than they are on the air. My good buddy, radio talk show host, all over in Texas, and he's also, which isn't enough for him, he wants to take over the state of Texas, which is fine with me. He's also in Glenn Beck's The Blaze Radio Network. My good brother, Chris Salcedo. So, I'm just curious. I don't see many defendants this week about the, quote, smoking gun email when it comes to Benghazi. I'm waiting for the liberal left and see where they're going to defend the president on this issue.
No, I'm saying, oh, by the way, first off, be honest with me. I'm trying a new hands-free device. How does it sound? Does it sound okay, crystal clear?
It sounds like you're in a wind tunnel, dude.
Does it really?
I mean, no, you're coming across clear, but I mean, I can still. It sounds like you're on the beach and there's 40-mile-an-hour wind. You sound like you sound like Mr. Suntan, Jim Cantori from the Weather Channel. You know when he goes.
Hey. I'm gonna switch back to the handheld. Forget it. Anyway,
no, that's much better.
Yeah, on the Benghazi thing, I was gratified, and I'd like to extend a welcome to the party to the mainstream press who remembered what journalism was. It's the first time they've remembered what journalism is since Barack Obama assumed office. And I'd like to congratulate them because you saw some pretty righteous indignation by the mainstream press yesterday. Jonathan Call of ABC News leading the way as they're coming to the realization that, yes, indeed, this administration has lied to us once again.
Really? I mean, Carl did a good job, but this is a big topic. I was listening to your boss the other day talking, I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago, with Cheryl Atkinson. I think Cheryl Atkinson adds a lot of credibility here. She doesn't try to make this a partisan issue. What is it that we know or we don't know, or what is it we know that we already knew that was just now pretty much open to the media to discuss, which they're not doing?
Well, we suspected a long time that it was just too convenient a narrative that this attack in Benghazi on September the 11th, 2012 was a result of a hateful video from some obscure filmmaker that nobody had ever heard of, the video or the filmmaker.
Right.
And that the administration was trying, that we suspected that because the campaign narrative was GM is dead, or GM is alive and bin Laden is dead, that a successful terrorist attack on Obama's watch at one of our installations abroad wouldn't fit well with that campaign narrative. So that's why they discovered, it was because of an internet video, not because our light footprint lead from behind foreign policy sucks. Well, it turns out that the video was never to blame, even though Mr. Obama had in his possession, and so did the intelligence agencies, and so did Hillary Clinton, and so did everybody that knew what was really going on for weeks on end knew that there wasn't this hateful video, but Hillary Clinton kept up with the charade, and so did Mr. Obama, heading all the way to the United Nations and giving a speech on the floor of the United Nations a full 2.5 weeks after we had already known this video was not responsible for it. And all this time they were trying to throw the CIA under the bus, the intelligence community, under the bus, and this recent email points the finger right back where we all suspected it was at the beginning. It was the White House that constructed this politically convenient narrative out of thin air, apparently, that was the cause of Benghazi. And the thing about it is that Jay Carney's trying to say, hey, look, man, this was the best intelligence we had at the time, and the CIA was telling us this. And then Jonathan Karl, to his credit, was saying, no, the CIA testified just last month that they never told you it was the video when it came to 4 American deaths in Benghazi. It was a terrorist attack. It had always been a terrorist attack, and the White House knew it. And then, so the question, Jay Carney, is, Jay, where did the narrative of the video come from? They have not told us. They're not going to tell us. I imagine there's just some kind of store they go to called Intelligence R Us, that they just said, oh, yeah, we need some politically convenient intelligence. Give it to us, will you please? Because none of our intelligence agencies are copying to this. So it doesn't exist.
I've always wondered if the media's new motto is, or maybe their new motto should be, is the Hillary Clinton motto now. What difference does it make? He got elected. It's 2 years later. Who cares? I mean, I think that's what it's going to be, is it not? That's the media's attitude. What difference does it make, Chris?
Well, that's what Jay Carney did from the podium yesterday, as he was getting his first serious questions about Benghazi, other than Fox News, of course, from other media outlets. It was kind of a shrug, and it's like, hey, guys, this is old news. Why are you talking to me about this again? Deal with it. We're reelected. We lied about Benghazi like we lied about Obamacare. We lied. We got reelected. So, stick it in your ear. We don't care. We control America, not you guys. That seems to be the premise coming from the White House podium, and it stinks to high heaven.
I'm not calling for anybody's impeachment right now. Because I think, and I know this is going to make me sound like a bleeding heart, but I understand why the Democrats, I mean, I'm not saying it's right. I don't think remember when the Iraq War happened, we need to find out what Bush, Cheney, and Halliburton, what was going on here. And my point is I have no problem of an investigation to find out how we mismanaged the intelligence or the lack thereof. Mine was about an issue, not to burn Bush or to burn the Democrats. The Democrats, of course, wanted to burn Bush and everything else out there. I don't have a problem of investigating Fast and Furious if it was done under Bush's predecessor or with Obama. I don't have a problem with investigation of Lois Lane Lerner, the prophet Elijah Muhammad Cummings, congressman out there. I don't have a problem of following out what happened with Benghazi. In other words, there should not be investigations. Congress just needs to do its job. But the bottom line is I don't bring partisan politics into this. I want to know what happened. Let's get it done with, and let's just be over it. And I think that should be enough for people to sit back and say, instead of trying to defend the president, instead, let's look at the issues, and that's where we talk about.
Well, I couldn't agree more but again, I think that what you're asking for is completely reasonable, but nobody on Capitol Hill seems interested in doing it. Nobody wants to seem to find out the truth, in particular, Republicans. I cannot for the life of me, and actually I shouldn't say Republicans, because the rank-and-file Republican is asking for an independent investigation on the Benghazi matter, and who else is standing in the way but the Republican establishment leadership? John Boehner, probably Eric Cantor has his nose in it as well. I think the American people, I think it was a recent poll, 61% of the American people want answers on Benghazi. They don't want it to die. But it seems that somebody's guarding somebody's behind, and it seems the Republicans are hell-bent on keeping the Democrats from sinking all the way down where they deserve to go because of Obamacare and all the other lies.
The Powerhouse talk show host out of Texas, my good buddy Chris Salcedo. You can also catch him on Glenn Beck's The Blaze radio network. See, this is what I've said. I mean, there is enough where if we could just bypass sometimes the very petty issues out there, Republicans and Democrats should both be singing Kumbaya with each other's hand held together because of how many congressional leaders want to exempt themselves from all the laws that they put on us people. They want to exempt themselves from Obamacare. They want to give cushy jobs to the Export-Import Bank, Fannie and Freddie, through all their political buddies out there. I mean, there's enough to get the both sides angry over there that politically you just want to tear down the system, and build something back up, and yet we can't seem to do it.
Well, you said something there that I found pretty interesting, that you said, let some of the petty stuff go by the wayside. The problem with Obama and the problem with extremist libs who run the government right now is that they don't do anything in small measure, especially their screw-ups. Everything that they are doing to the country, all their policy failures are major, big screw-ups. Foreign policy is in a shambles right now. I mean, just go down the list from Egypt to Libya to Syria to Russia and Ukraine. I mean, to Iran getting a nuclear weapon, ignoring North Korea, for crying out loud. I mean, it's a basket case, the entire light footprint lead from behind foreign policy. domestic policy, Obamacare. Look at our economy, 0.1% growth in the first quarter, and the administration blames it on the weather?
Yeah.
Do you know how weak our economy is, courtesy of President Obama and his treacherous Democrats, that it can't handle some bad weather, a strong winter? I mean, Mr. Obama would like us to think that he is the first occupier of the Oval Office to ever deal with a bad winter. And it's because of that the economy is faltering. No, it is because of his wrong-headed, boob-headed policies that are doing this. And you know what? All these people that don't want to see impeachment or don't want to see this administration get their comeuppance, I'm sorry, I do. They're doing real harm to the United States of America, and they need to be brought to account. Obama, his enablers, and anyone else responsible for inflicting this kind of misery on the United States of America. Hell, Ed, we're not going to be the #1 powerhouse economically in the world anymore.
I understand.
As of next year, it's going to be China.
I understand that, but that listen, and I'm a numbers guy. That happened, and that's been on steroids with Obama, but that was happening before Obama. Let's just be honest, all right? But it's been on steroids with Obama, so I semi-agree with you on that one. But my whole thing is that there should be enough to anger people. I mean, if this was the private sector, Chris, and you and I, let's say you and I had worked for Blaze, all right? And then we find out that a couple other guys who haven't been there as longer, haven't paid the price whatsoever, but yet they're getting better benefits, they're getting better. But you and I would be knocking on Glenn Beck's door going, hey, bro, what the heck is going on? And you'd have every right to do that. What I'm saying is that I don't understand why the American people or people in Florida, Texas, or when there's both sides are sitting back saying, listen, set aside the bills for a second. The bottom line is what you guys do and how you guys give your fully vested pensions and the health care and everything else and how you don't abide by the same rules. Let me tell you something. If this happened in the private sector, we'd either quit or we would be out there protesting. But to normal people out there, for Congress, it's business as usual.
Well, that's true. And either that, in the private sector, if we screwed up as badly as President Obama and his Democrats have screwed up the country, we'd be fired. But no, as you said, as you rightly point out, the board of directors in America, which is supposed to be we the people, have checked out. And you know what? I'm going to put. I used to be an anchor and a reporter. I put that right back on the press. It took ABC News and the other people in the press room yesterday who were up in arms about the lies coming out of the White House. It took them 2 years to come around to the truth because they just swallowed everything that Team Obama had given them, hook, line, and sinker, and they forgot how to be journalists. It's their fault. They are not taking their First Amendment charge seriously. They are partisan, and they're guarding Obama's flank rather than holding him accountable, which is what we all should be doing as Americans. He needs to be held to account, and so do his treacherous Democrats.
Did you call him Resident Obama?
Resident Obama. Yes, I have a T-shirt about it. You got to check it out.
I got to see that. Resident Obama. But, I hate to say this, but, when you use the word resident, I think of Resident Evil.
No, the resident came about as you know what? When he won re-election, we couldn't call him Obama the entire time, but he has partaken in trying to redefine what it is to be president of the United States. He never governs. He always campaigns. It's one big delightful speech and vacation after another. He never does anything of substance or reality. So this is my message to the White House, that the presidency is not yours to redefine, Mr. Obama. So I will not give you the honorific of president. So we got to call him something. So resident, He gets to occupy the Oval Office for the next couple of years at taxpayer
expense. It's a funny soundbite.
And all that kind of stuff.
It's a cool soundbite.
Resident Obama.
Hey, if the libs, it's a funny soundbite, I admit. If the liberals agree that, their biggest excuse that they're blaming everything on the weather, then y'all should be in favor of global warming then.
Yeah, it was a bad winter. Yeah, what happened to all this global warming that was out there? Oh yeah, well we had a really terrible winter. It's man, they contradict themselves at every turn, do they not? But Ed, like I said, like you said, finances are your specialty. What does it say when the administration says that our economy is so weak that it takes a couple of months of bad weather to knock it down to almost neutral, almost in reverse? that means the fundamentals of the economy are not strong. Mr. Obama is ruining the country economically, and he ought to be held to account.
A couple minutes left. The Insiders, which is on the Washington Post. By the way, for you liberals out there, you notice I'm not quoting Fox or Blaze. I'm the Washington Post because, I try to use a little bit of moderate liberal newspaper. I don't know. Can you call the Washington Post a moderate newspaper? Anyways, it says that the Democrats own this economy. Now, I think it's by Ed Rogers. I don't know. He might be a partisan. I don't know. But he says the Democrats own the economy. So I put on my Facebook just Ed Dean. I'm not going to put on too much on the radio webpage. I just say, wait a second. This is what I posted. I said, there's no way Obama owns this economy. He's been president into his 6th year now. Wait, we still can't blame Bush. And I said, you watch. The Dems will be hush on this issue. Go ahead.
You are right. As a matter of fact, just a week ago, and I know you can find this, and there's a couple of examples when Obama has done this, speaking to everybody, telling everybody how bad everything is. And as if he hasn't been the occupier of the Oval Office for the past 5.5, 6 years, you ought to find those speeches when he goes down the laundry list of, oh, yeah, Wall Street's doing great, but, yeah, wages are stagnant, and taxes are up there, and people are not working, and it's all in the era of Obama. This is all happening in the era of Obama, and he goes down the laundry list of how everything sucks in the country pretty well, and it's one of the things I can say I agree with President Obama with. His tenure at the Oval Office has been destructive to our nation. Congratulations, Mr. Obama.
Well, I just want to have the discussion. I got to get going, but I want to have a simple discussion with the Democrats. You can talk about income inequality and the minimum wage. I'm like, wait a second. Do the Dems end the economy, yes or no? That's all I want to know, and I won't even get a straight answer. Chris Salcedo from the Blaze Radio Network. Brother, I love you. Thanks for coming on.
Ed Dean, the Radio Machine. We'll talk to you later.
All right, coming up next, Kevin Derby. By the way, to all the Republicans out there, the chairman, Lenny Curry, thank goodness, he's horrible. He's stepping out for the Republican Party of Florida. I've been calling him to step down for 2 years. And yet Charlie Crist has very little money compared to Rick Scott. Rick Scott's spending millions of dollars, and he's still down in the polls. What's the explanation? By the way, I don't hold water for Rick Scott. I just want to know the answer. We'll ask Kevin Derby in a few moments here on the Ed Dean Radio Show. Shine so bright, put a right on me, 'cause tonight is mine. I'm gonna dance so wild. I like them disco lights, 'cause I'm a disco child.
This is SRN News.
Judicial Watch obtained the emails through a Freedom of Information Act request and found communications that Republicans describe as the smoking gun. Conservatives have criticized the Obama administration for being untruthful about the U.S. Embassy attack. As reported by USA Today and other news outlets, in one email, White House official Ben Rhodes lists goals for explaining the attack. One of the goals is to blame the video. Another is to reinforce the president's strength. Greg Clugston, SRN News, the White House. The email shows a White House official helping prepare Susan Rice for TV interviews on the weekend after the attack that left 4 Americans dead in Benghazi.
This document was not about Benghazi.
That was spokesman Jay Carney during a tense White House briefing. He insisted the talking points were about the general situation in the Muslim world. Republicans have criticized the administration for suggesting the Benghazi violence resulted from an internet video. Greg Clugston, SRN News, the White House.
New York Democrat Charles Schumer called raising the minimum wage an issue of basic fairness.
The minimum wage has failed to keep up with inflation and lost a third of its value. That is not a fair shot for Americans.
But Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said Democrats were ignoring studies that say raising the minimum wage will hurt job creation.
They don't seem to care that about 6 in 10 Americans oppose a bill like this if it means losing hundreds of thousands of American jobs.
Democrats and Republicans vow to keep up their respective fights both for and against the higher minimum wage. Linda Kenyon, SRN News, Capitol Hill.
Supporters say it's all about saving American jobs.
If we don't pass this bill, the business will go to foreign
insurance companies.
Pennsylvania's Charlie Dent.
This bill represents a very narrow change to the law that saves jobs. This bill simply mends the law. It does not end the law.
The measure passed 268 to 150, with 60 Democrats joining Republicans. Wally Hines, SRN News, Capitol Hill.
More details at srnnews.com.
My name is Alex Fernandez, and I'm a student at Florida State University. I'm a biological science major on the men's swim and dive team and a volunteer in my community. When I was young, I had role models. They showed the way by doing what was right. Now, it's my turn to step up. I believe in we before me. Giving back to my community is how I live united. The ACC and United Way. Live united.
All right, more of the Ed Dean Radio Show, the #1 political talk show anywhere in the state of Florida. Thank you so much for tuning in. The email address, eddeanradio@gmail. Kevin Derby, my good buddy from the SunshineStateNews.com, here on the program. Before I get to the poll numbers here in a little bit, the National Journal came out, Stan Greenberg, James Carville, Paul Gallo's crowd, all these guys, I guess we're doing a poll or something through NPR, doing some numbers, and they came back and they were advising Democrats by saying, do not use the R word this year, better known as recovery. Now, I'm not trying to I've always said for the last several months, even when the numbers for Obamacare were probably much lower than they are now, they're still not that great. But I kept saying, Kevin, listen, Republicans, the Democrats are consistent. They've got 5-6 issues. They may regurgitate the same issues, but at least they're consistent. The Republicans are putting all their eggs in one basket, I think, when it comes to the issue of Obamacare. Let's talk about some of the congressional races here in Florida. Even maybe you can talk about this with the governor's race. I don't want to talk about the polls yet. Having said that, the word recovery, which basically said the Democrats are not supposed to use that word because when you look at the latest economic numbers that just came out, 0.01, and we were talking recession numbers here. This is not, of course, some Democrats think this is a blip, all right? But I think if the Republicans are smart, this is a great issue to talk about, and I don't care whether the economy comes back and there's a 2% growth when it should be doing 3 to 4%. I think the economy is an issue, and I really don't even see the Republicans, but I think it's if Obamacare is A, I think B should be about the economy. I wonder if they're going to talk about it this year in the state of Florida.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, but I don't think the Republicans are going to touch the economy. Look, the chief theme they're pushing is the economy is so much better under Rick Scott than it is under Charlie Crist. That's what they keep saying. That's going to be their chief bullet against Charlie Crist. If Republicans, even the congressional Republicans, go, well, the economy stinks, they're slashing Rick Scott's throat. And to be very candid, the Republicans basically made that argument in 2012 when Mitt Romney was on the ballot, saying, oh, those unemployment numbers, that unemployment drop under Obama means nothing. Now those same Republicans are turning around saying, oh, look how great the unemployment drop's been under Governor Scott. They can't have can't have it both ways.
Well, but hold on, wait. Some Democrats have pointed out, I know some other speculators, political speculators out there, spectators, have said, but wait a second. And I've said this before. You remember the Democrats or the liberal newspapers out there, of course, never reported about the labor force, the lowest it's been since the days of Jimmy Carter, and yet Rick Scott, the same. But now they're talking about it because there's a Republican running. Well, okay, that's fine. Yeah. But now, if you look at all the jobs, and let's be honest, 500,000, quote, jobs have been reported, been created, and yet I hear from people all over the map on both sides, there's no more, maybe 4% of those jobs are actually people working as of those numbers. In other words, they're ghost numbers is what they're saying.
I think some of them are ghost numbers. With a lot of these jobs are frankly jobs that aren't exactly ideal. Part of the problem is, to be very candid with you, we're looking back at the 90s. We're looking back at when the economy was booming. We're just not there yet. We're not there. And there are some opportunities, to be sure. I think Rick Scott's one of the few guys who actually gets that Florida's economy is fundamentally changing. We can't rely on just tourism, agriculture, and housing constructions anymore. We've got to find other major legs for the Florida economy. I think Scott realizes, for example, transportation and logistics is probably a huge huge bonus for Florida economy, but it's just not there yet. And a lot of those jobs, they're ghost jobs. They're jobs that, frankly, nobody wants. They're jobs that people have kind of accepted, accepted out of spite, out of desperation. I will say one thing. I was talking to a young student just graduated from Florida State, told me, oh, there's plenty of jobs to look for. I've got 3 or 4 myself. And I think you're seeing a lot of that,
So, I mean, if 57% of the nation still believes we're in a recession, is that one of the reasons why the Rick Scott's numbers, I mean, we can proceed into the poll numbers now, is that one of the reasons why do you think Rick Scott's numbers are not doing that well is because they don't feel the recession or the recovery is turned around even here in Florida?
Well, I think a lot of people do see the economy not getting better, and Scott's boosterism on the economy, telling them how wonderful it is, how much it's working. They aren't quite buying it yet. Now, Scott can repeat it. He's repeated it for 3 years. He'll try to repeat it in the next 6 months. We'll see if it buys. Having said that, looking at some of the polls, for example, the one from Quinnipiac University that was released yesterday, it has Charlie Crist 49%, Rick Scott 39%. I'm not buying that poll. I'm sorry. That poll has 31% Democrats, 25% Republicans. There is no way in an off-year election that Republicans are going to be outnumbered that badly. Look, in 2010, it was 36% Democrats, 36% Republicans at the polls. I'm not buying a 6% shift for the Democratic vote in 2014. Most other polls have shown, there was a Gravis poll released yesterday showing Rick Scott ahead by 1. That strikes me as a little bit outside the realm either. I think most polls are pretty much showing Rick Scott down between 3 to 7%. And I think that's where it is. I think he needs a touchdown, maybe a touchdown, an extra point to get back in the game, to take the lead. But I don't see him down by 10. I don't see him up by 1 either.
Well, here's the thing. Quinnipiac has him up, has Charlie Crist up by 10 points. Rick Scott spending millions of dollars, which is not helping him out. Some of the other numbers, I think, was it, which was the one that came out a couple weeks ago that showed Charlie Crist up by, 6? Which one was that, Quinnipiac? No, wait.
No, Quinnipiac, they had public policy polling had, I think, Crist up by 4. You had Survey USA showing, I think, Crist up by 6. I think Survey USA had him up by 6.
So Quinnipiac has him up by 10. Gravis, which I know those guys quite well, them along with Human Events, have Rick Scott up by 1. How do they break these numbers down? Tell the audience this.
Well, with that number, again, that one's 31. The Quinnipiac one's 31% Democrat, 25% Republican. The rest either independent, no party affiliation. And, that especially is a little bit off. I think that, again, in an off-year election, there's no way Democrats are going to have that much of a turnout advantage. Maybe in 2012 to 2008 they might have. Certainly not in 2014. It's not that's not how it's breaking down. The thing that's striking to me, across the board, whether it's the University of North Florida poll, whether it's Sunshine State News' own poll, whether it's Survey Service, all the polls are showing Rick Scott really reeling in the Republican base, which he needs to. I mean, we've seen some polls which showed Scott's approval among Republicans about 59%, 55 to 59%. That's abysmal. He cannot go into battle with that many Republicans defecting off his base. The newest polls are showing Rick Scott getting roughly into the high 70, 77, 79% Republican support against Charlie Crist, who won 3 statewide offices as a Republican. I think that's where Scott needs to be. If he can amp it up a little higher, that'd be terrific. Democrats are breaking heavily towards Charlie Crist despite his Republican past. Most of them are showing, like Rick Scott, about 77 to 81% of the Democrats are backing their candidate, Charlie. So Democrats are coming home. Charlie does have a lead among independents, which I do think is a little bit oversampled in the Quinnipiac poll.
Kevin Derby from the SunshineStateNews.com here on the Ed Dean Radio Show. I mean, the Crist people have something to brag about. Hey, Rick Scott, I mean, he's getting all this publicity during an election season. He's getting all this publicity as the governor. Nothing really dividing him between him and his party. Rick Scott getting all this publicity by newspaper, bills being signed, session is in place till, today or whatever. And he's filling $5 million. And Crist's people, I understand, they can get away with this, rightfully so. We're up by 8 to 10 points. I mean, it's a great question I got to ask.
Well, I think, look, a lot of people ended up in 2010 voting for Rick Scott, but not exactly liking him. That's the Bill McCollum people. Of course, the battle against Alex Sink was extremely ugly. It's the closest gubernatorial race Florida had seen in decades. So, even going in, Rick Scott had high negatives. The problem is Rick Scott, to be very candid with you, untelegenic, awkward on television. Even looking at some of his commercials, they're running pretty heavily on ESPN and other stations up here in Tallahassee. This is the best they can do. And even in the commercials, his own commercials, Rick Scott is coming off extremely awkward, talking about his service in the Navy, talking about how he started a business. You know, and these are the best, you assume they're using the best outtakes they have on him. That persona and that lack of presence is hurting Rick Scott badly, especially compared to Charlie Crist. The Republican Party of Florida, and Let's Get to Work, and all the other Rick Scott teams at least get that. They keep saying one of their new ads is Charlie Crist, slick politician, lousy governor. They recognize that Charlie Crist is likable. He's much more likable than Rick Scott, and that does have consequences.
Well, the question, I mean, this is kind of really have some talking points right now because, I mean, again, Rick Scott had really, I mean, Lenny Curry from the RPF is stepping down, thank goodness, from the Republican Party of Florida. He doesn't add anything. Rick Scott hasn't really had any problems with his own party. He's spending $5 million. I mean, this is a time where everybody hears about the governor through local radio, local TV, local public broadcasting because the bill's being passed and what's not being passed. And he's spending $5 million, and he's still getting shellacked by Crist in the polls.
Well, yeah, he's still down in the polls. I mean, again, though, look at where he was a year ago. I mean, we had the polls showing Rick Scott down by 17 to 19 points. He had a huge hole to get out of. He's certainly not out of it by any stretch of the imagination. I do think this race will tighten up, but he has essentially, look, he's had 3 years, and they have started running numbers, running commercials, throwing their money around. I get all of that. They're going to have to do a lot more of that to get Rick Scott above Charlie Crist.
Is there any coming divide? I mean, do we see anything right now? Because Nan Rich is not even being talked about right now. Is that going to change among the Democratic primary?
No. You look at the Quinnipiac poll, Nan Rich's numbers with Democrats, 15% favorable, 2% unfavorable, the rest, the 83%, who? And here's the thing. Nan Rich has been in this race for over 2 years now, over 2 years. She has had ample opportunity to get in this race. She hasn't done it. She's basically putting all her eggs on getting into a debate with Charlie Crist.
She can't wait.
Charlie shows no sign of biting at that. I think Nan Rich is increasingly going to be more and more of a non-factor.
Yeah, but you want to know something? I bet you what's going to happen. Something's going to happen here because everybody wakes up after Memorial Day for the most part. Something's going to happen here. She's going to run ads. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I don't think this new progressive website that's out there slamming Charlie. There was an article out there whether or not this was GOP fronting this, and then it basically pointed out that no, these are actually real liberals. Something's going to happen where she's going to get some money for some liberal. And they're going to sit back, and I'm guaranteeing if they're not, then the Nan, to all you Nan Rich people, if you don't do this, you're stupid. All right? I would be running ads all over the place going, do a website, charliewon'tdebatenan.com. In fact, man, I should just do that. I should go and buy that domain. charliewon'tdebatenan.com. Run ads left and right. Let me tell you something. You want to get your name out there, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, I fully agree. The problem is Nan Rich herself in the campaign, they're not bringing in dollars. So you need an angel donor. You need somebody who's willing to go to bat for her. And that's just not.
Yeah, there are plenty of rich liberals out there that would give her money.
Yeah, absolutely. But the problem is you'd be betting on the wrong candidate, an extreme dark horse, and you would be twisting the president's tail in the White House. You'd be twisting the Democratic congressional leadership. I mean, I know Debbie Wasserman Schultz is staying out of it technically, but most of her team, most of the Democrats, are starting to increasingly back Charlie. Charlie actually reeled in an endorsement from Martin O'Malley, the governor of Maryland, who's
big
probably
deal.
the most aggressive Democratic presidential candidate.
Sometime
starting more and more to back Charlie.
Sometime we're gonna have to figure out. I mean, I've got these Democratic ads where what they've said about Charlie. I would love. I mean, we can speculate down the road, but I would love to see, or love just to think, what many of these Democrats think about Charlie. I would love to speculate.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, one thing to keep in mind, one guy's going to be on center stage for the Democrats both next week at a fundraiser in Miami and then at the Jefferson Jackson, what they're now calling the Blue Leadership Dinner in June, and that's Bill Clinton. If Bill Clinton throws his arm around Charlie, if there's a major photo op, I think Nan Rich's window gets smaller and smaller. Bill Clinton is still the man on the Democratic side, even more so than Obama.
Yeah, he is the man. All right, Kevin Derby from Sunshine State News, thank you for coming on.
Pleasure, my friend.
All right, tomorrow. See who? I don't even know who I have lined up for tomorrow, but it won't matter. It'll be politically incorrect Friday. Any part of the archive radio show, just go to eddeanradio.com. eddeanradio.com. You can catch any part of the archive radio show that you missed today. So some of you liberals out there think you can catch me swinging on this and swaining on that and leaning. No. Not gonna happen. We'll see you tomorrow on the Ed Dean Radio Show.
With SRN Sports, I'm Michael Harrington. The NBA playoffs rolled on yesterday. Dwight Howard had 22 points and 14 rebounds as the Rockets beat Portland 108-98 to pull within 3 games to 2 in the series. Howard says they got to play with confidence if they're going to win number 6 in Portland.
It's going to be tough. You know, nothing in life is easy, and we want to earn it. So we got to go out there and play like we believe we can win.
San Antonio Spurs have grabbed a 3-2 lead in the conference quarterfinals. Tony Parker had 23 points, and the Spurs never trailed in the 109-103 victory over Dallas. Toronto coughed up a 26-point lead before downing Brooklyn 115-113 for the 3-2 series advantage there. And the LA Lakers are looking for a coach. Mike D'Antoni has resigned after less than 2 seasons at the post in Los Angeles. This is SRN Sports. There was NHL playoff action yesterday as well. The New York Rangers earned the right to take on the Pittsburgh Penguins in the Eastern Conference semifinals. Rangers are 6-0 in Game 7s at Madison Square Garden. They scored a 2-1 victory over Philadelphia yesterday. Minnesota rallied for a 5-4 overtime win at Colorado. The Wild move on to meet the defending Stanley Cup champion Blackhawks. The LA Kings outscored San Jose 5-1 to advance to an all-Southern California second round. Kings get the